We're good to go. Thank you very much, Greg. So this is session 2, the emerging technologies. This is perfect timing, right? Perfect timing. SASE, SD-WAN Showdown. And I am Dave Goodwin, the managing partner and co-founder of ATC, or Advanced Technology Consulting. Thank you all for joining us today. And my panelists, hopefully they're all standing by too since we got started a little bit early, is Jerry Young, sales engineer from CATO Networks. Jerry? Can we get, yeah, thank you. Some of you in here I know a little bit better. I'm going to be calling you out to kind of liven it up a little bit, right? All right, so Matt Douglas is next, Senior Director of Solution Engineering from CBTS. Okay. And Alex Cooley, Junior Consultant and a member of ATC's Delta team. All right, so if you guys don't mind, now that you're up here, if we could maybe do like, I think we have lots of time since we're a little early, right? So maybe we could do 60 seconds or so of a background, like whatever you feel. Like where'd you start, or how you end up where you are now, how long you've been there. You know, don't necessarily specifically follow that script, just a little bit on your background.
So yeah, my name is Jerry Young. I've been at CATO now for about 2.5 years. I am the manager of the sales engineering team for the Central. So supporting all of the all opportunities and partners such as ATC and anything related to SD-WAN and SASE.
What did you do before that?
Before that, I worked for VAR CLEC for about 10 to 15 years, supporting both the technology side as well as transitioning from like MPLS services to what we're looking at now, where we're shifting workloads up to the cloud and doing things quite a bit differently in terms of connectivity.
All right, great. Alex?
Yeah, my name is Alex. Is my mic on or no? Is my mic on?
No,
there we
it
go.
is for sure now.
My name is Alex Cooley. I came from Miami University 3 years ago, so I've been working at ATC ever since. As Dave said, I'm a part of our Delta team that Doug and Allie and a couple others in this room are a part of. So we walk our customers through discovery all the way through implementation.
All right, great.
He's the rose between two thorns.
There you
go. Right. There you go.
Right. You might need to do a little of this later on. And last but not least, Matt Douglas.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. My name is Matt Douglas, Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at CBTS. So similarly, I run a group of sales engineers that support the channel and customers like ATC. Been there about 12 years. For a while, did some things around managing our UCaaS platform, and then about 6 or 7 years ago, came in to manage our SE group. So thank you.
All right, great. Welcome, fellas. Thank you very much. We'll get right into the questions because I want to get as much information out there for the people that are attending as possible. So, how are SD-WAN and SASE related? Is there a difference? And what is SASE exactly? I'll start with you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So SD-WAN and SASE, really starting from SD-WAN, that's a core component of SASE, software-defined wide area network. That's the component of SASE that's really going to allow access to your applications right from the edge. Like I said, it's a core component, and it's one of the biggest frameworks of SASE.
So, Matt or Jerry, would one of you kind of tackle the difference?
Sure, absolutely. I think Alex makes a good point, right, that the edge now, right, we used to have MPLS networks or a combination of MPLS and internet and, typical Cisco ISR routers. And this whole idea of SD-WAN is putting an intelligent edge there with cloud orchestration layer that then can start to be able to connect your sites, either, site to data center, site to cloud apps. And so the SD-WAN component, in my mind anyway, is about an intelligent routing of your traffic and prioritization across that network. Then you start to think about SASE, and the security part, if you would, is then what are the cloud security components that can join that SD-WAN fabric? Whether there's secure web gateway, CASB services, even endpoint protection starts to get in that conversation. So I kind of think of SD-WAN as the edge intelligence and routing engine, and then the SASE components around kind of the security framework.
I'll add that I think it's that SD-WAN is the driving force behind SASE. So as we see products mature and adjust and change over time, essentially what's happened is we all decided that we didn't want to deal with MPLS anymore. So we looked at SD-WAN, great technology, but it was missing a lot of the pieces that we needed, the additional security like Matt mentioned, the CASB, the secure web gateway, all those types of different components. And so this is the next iteration of that. It's moving all of your traffic off of your site and dealing with the traditional way that we handled networking and security up to the cloud to simplify it, to make it easier to deal with and to live with.
All right, great. Matt, you mentioned something about the components or characteristics of a SASE platform. And I'm sure that we're touching on some of that with the diagram that we have up there, but why don't you give us some, and you guys can chime in when you want.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to say I believe that between CATO and our underlying technology that we typically use, VeloCloud, you're looking at a couple of really the leading platforms out there to solve these business problems. I see Nick, you're shaking your head. And there are some differences between CATO and kind of our approach here. But I think it's about, in the past as a service provider, like I've been with Cincinnati Bell and CBTS 12 years, we would come in and sell you an MPLS network and we'd be like, here's your network and good luck with your applications. We don't care. And now the conversation is really around as we come in, as ATC comes in with you guys as a partner and consults, it's about where do those applications sit? How are those applications routing today? Let's say site to site, again, site to data center, site to cloud applications. And so we come in now as partners to start to talk about the applications and how do we help ensure or improve that application experience kind of no matter where you're working from. So SASE, security's just got to be part of that conversation now, particularly in the this pandemic, and I'm not sure if we're post-pandemic yet, but it's I haven't been in the office now in 18 months, That's changed my organization's need for their security structure. It was different than when I came to the office, so.
Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably about the same thing, right? So we're talking, again, the same way infrastructure as a service kind of transformed the way that we think about servers and compute and dealing with things today. This is the exact same thing except for network and security. And so as you start to transition it to the cloud where you have scale and flexibility, you ultimately make using those services a heck of a lot easier. And when you have it delivered by a provider that is going to do all the underlying nasty parts, all the security updates, all of those different components that become hugely important because we look at what's happening around in Eastern Europe today. It becomes hugely important to make sure that we have all of these security fabrics updated as quickly as possible because we don't want to run into any problems that correspond with some latest outbreak that's taking place.
I got a quick question for the group out here.
Yeah.
In the group here, is anybody today moved to a secure web gateway, to cloud firewall services? Anybody at all? One? Okay. Because I don't know, but I'd be curious, kind of Nick or Dave and Jerry, what you say is that 3 or 4 years ago, nobody was looking at cloud security. It just wasn't even on the table, right? And in the last 2 years, more and more customers are looking at cloud security, particularly when they get that SD-WAN world, because they don't want to be managing firewalls back at a data center and hairpinning traffic. They'd like to take that. They'd like to move that day zero edge farther away from their network. So I'm kind of surprised only one, because usually I see a little bit more than that when you ask that question. But we're seeing a huge uptake in cloud security.
Good question, Matt. So we're going to let Nick Inger, our CTO, kind of chime in too, because he talks to a lot of these companies kind of on the front edge. So maybe talk about a few years ago, how many people do we have that were looking at something like that versus maybe today? Secure web gateways or whatever component.
Well, I think across the board, we're seeing it a lot more, right? In the past 24 months, it's been every opportunity that comes across my desk. We're now talking about cloud gateways. We're talking about secure web access. We're talking about different functionality that really wasn't available 24, 36 months ago. As we move more applications into the cloud, we have to make sure that they're secure regardless of where they're being accessed from. And I think that's the biggest topic that we're going to be start to see going down the road. It's not only making sure our locations are secure, but taking it to the next level, making sure our cloud environments are secure and how our end users are accessing that cloud environment.
Yeah, I think he makes a terrific point there, right? We talk about the cloud workloads, and a lot of people are moving stuff to the cloud. It just doesn't make sense logically anymore to have a network that's secured within your organization. You need it to be in the cloud. You need something that's flexible, that can adjust, that you can be able to quickly make a decision. Like tomorrow, maybe today you're looking at RingCentral, but tomorrow you're looking at Zoom. How do you build out a network and have a solution that is equipped to be able to quickly adjust as your business adjusts?
And let me another quick comment
Fire
too.
away.
Tell me what you think of this, Jerry or Alex. I don't think it's an either-or situation. Or Nick, tell me what you think about this. It's not really either-or. We run into situations where, okay, I'm going to take a huge group of users and move that into cloud security, but I still have reasons for firewalls back in my data centers, for VPN, for public-facing web services, other groups of users, et cetera. So I think it's also about, consulting with you guys as customers and saying, okay, here's what these cloud services could do for this group of users, but you may have other situations where you still need other security appliances in a data center or even in locations, right? There are times where, security traffic might be inside across VLANs or from site to site, kind of east-west. There are still reasons why cloud security can't take care of everything and there are other security fabrics. So it's about consulting, but we're seeing this huge uptake in moving as much to the cloud as possible.
I think one thing's for sure, it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? Whether we're talking about the network or security or a cloud, hybrid cloud, I mean, it really just comes down to the customer's business, where their applications reside, who's accessing those, where they're accessing them from. So there's so many different ways to slice it up. It's all a matter of just having some sort of advisor or folks on they can go deep and have a good understanding of. And Matt, I know there have been times we've talked before where we'll bring some opportunity your way that's a great fit and you knock it out of the park, and there'll be other times where you're like, this is really maybe a better fit somewhere else. And that I really think that's how we build into the IT community, right? There's plenty of business out there. There are plenty of customers to help. Let's just do what we do best and find those opportunities and know what we can do for them and what we can't do for them.
Yeah, Dave, I think that's a great point. And to Matt's point too, but the differences between CBTS, CATO, and those of the like, there's so many different technologies out there that really organizations are just looking for a consultant to truly understand what the needs of the business are. When you think about SASE, one thing that comes to my mind is points of presence. You want to be with a vendor that has a strong points of presence across not only the US, but across the globe, really putting your applications right there at the edge and making them secure.
Were you going to say something too, Jerry?
I was just going to touch more on that, right? The importance of a partner like ATC is vital to your success. And that's because we're all in here having these conversations on a daily basis with them, talking about these different technologies, talking about what the drivers are to look at a CATO, talking about what the drivers are to use a VeloCloud. And this is a service that you guys can take advantage of that ultimately makes your life easier, because they have the insight and you don't have to waste hours and hours of time having to do the research and the work that comes along with trying to find a new vendor to put in.
I got you later on that. Thank you.
$20, that's right.
Yeah, at least a drink for sure. Could you define how it is different than networks? When I say I mean like SASE, how it's different, and even SD-WAN to some extent, is different than the networks or security technology that the folks might be using today, especially since I think we had one that raised their hand on a secure web gateway. So how's it different?
Well, so we had one doing secure web gateways, which means I think the rest of the organization has got firewalls either at a data center, where we're taking traffic back across the network to the data center and going out, or individual firewalls at each location. And we're just seeing, as when people come in and completely, first of all, what we see a lot of times is people are starting to look at UCAS. When you look at UCAS, that starts to change how you got to engineer your network. Because when I had MPLS networks, it was about taking applications back to a data center. Big one of those is PBXs, the phone system. So as we start to move to UCAS, that changes the need for how you kind of look at your wide area network. People are trying to get more bandwidth. Because MPLS still is expensive, and people are, you can go out and buy gigabit now at incredibly low cost, right? So how do I get more bandwidth? My applications like UCAS, et cetera, move into the cloud. My users aren't in the office as much, right? So a big part of this next generation cloud security is when I'm sitting in my laptop, whether I'm in network or whether I'm working from a Starbucks, I've got that same security fabric. I'm still going through a next generation UTM, a unified threat management stack in the cloud. So that's another big part of what we're seeing as customers, as they re-look at their network and look at their applications, they're starting to have to re-engineer these things for a massive, this massive work from home environment that we just didn't have 3 years ago. So
I'll add one of the challenges that I've seen is when you look at point solutions, all of them are independently managed, independently controlled, and for you as an organization to be able to hire people that are going to be able to support each of these different applications, to have the technical wherewithal to deal with problems when they come up, becomes a huger and huger challenge. The big reason why I think SASE has become so mainstay is that we're moving all that up to the cloud. We're simplifying. We're decoupling the complexity. We're making a single pane of glass. We're making it much easier for you to consume, use, and manage it. And because that's taking place in that nature, it really transforms the way that you can operate your IT business. You can be much more focused on how do I make an application get closer to its destination versus just trying to survive the day-to-day operations of trying to make these solutions work and praying to God that nobody hacks you, or that you have to wait for Palo Alto to do its update that's going to take a few extra days and then you have to schedule an outage after that on top of it and pray to God that the results of that outage don't take down some other component of your business.
But you mentioned too kind of this cloud orchestration layer and this visibility, this pane of glass, right? Traditional networks, a Cisco ISR router at the edge with MPLS, with internet, even if somebody had put together a decent, DMVPN or BGP kind of backup network, visibility was terrible. I didn't have any idea what's going on with circuits. I don't know when they go on brownout or blackout. Convergence time is a long time in those things. I lose a main circuit and applications may take 30 seconds or a minute, these kinds of things to converge to an alternative path. So one of the big things we see too is visibility into the network, right? As a managed service provider, and I think CATO's probably similar to this, is that we'll actually even take responsibility for circuits even if they're not ours. Let's say you've got 50 locations out there and I've got, a cable and a DIA coming into every location. Well, you give us LOA and we'll actually even take circuit remediation because we want to be the partner to help you not only kind of build that next generation network for the right application flows, but then help troubleshoot and keep that up, to your point of focusing on the strategic things that are happening in your business and not keeping the lights on. So this visibility from a pane of glass, the alerting that comes out of these platforms is just completely different than it used to be in the old world.
I'll date myself a little bit. I can go back to the times of X.25 and ATM and frame relay and then MPLS, and I think about what the divisions, especially of larger companies with lots of locations, how difficult it was for them to manage all that. They didn't have any single pane of glass. You can see it all. You can see the edge devices. You can see phones. You can see multiple circuits. You can take care of everything used to be an individual thing, individual pieces of equipment or boxes that are out in the field, as well as all the different circuits. And then at that time, you'd have primarily AT&T, MCI, and Sprint. Going way back, and then you'd have they can only reach certain areas, so you had multiple networks, and how could you connect them? And certainly has come a long way to aid the business. So why should they be looking at SASE, Alex?
So I think that organizations should be looking at SASE, especially if you're in an MPLS environment or you're just really trying to get visibility, like Matt said, into your network. The capabilities from a single pane of glass, where you can go and manage your applications, your firewall, things like that. It really is consolidating all of your technologies and putting it into one, so you don't have to allocate so many resources to managing that on the back end.
Matt, Jerry, should we be looking at SD-WAN as well?
You better be. I mean, even networks that still have MPLS components, we have a number of customers, I know CATO does as well, that there are still reasons, let's say they've got 50 locations, but I've got a main headquarters, I've got 4 distribution centers, I've got some applications for latency reasons or even just kind of cultural, emotional reasons that I'm going to keep MPLS to my 4 big distribution centers. SD-WAN now becomes that edge device that offers more intelligent, quicker routing, convergence, application priority, an easier way with a single pane of glass, even to manage hybrid networks like that. So, again, I think it's coming in and kind of understanding what are the challenges your IT people have today to keep track of their network, to keep track of applications. And SD-WAN, whether it's all internet or internet and MPLS or point-to-points, is still, these are really, it's a useful edge technology. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say something similar, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. So figure out what portion of this technology can add value to you. If it's just the SD-WAN piece, great. If that's going to ultimately improve the experience between your branch locations or even your ability to get access to cloud applications, you should definitely take advantage of it. If you have an existing investment from a security perspective, you don't necessarily need to just tear it all out and forklift it up to this brand new solution. There's ways that you can transition. And my favorite part about SASE itself is because it's delivered in the cloud, for me to enable security for you is a checkbox and a slider. That's it. So if it's a situation today where you have an existing investment and maybe you want to consider security down the road after that thing comes up for renewal, slide the bar and instantly you have that same security framework that you had when you were on-prem.
I think that's a great point about the idea of incorporating with existing investments, because we come to companies that maybe recently just purchased some secure web gateway services. Maybe they just bought Zscaler or bought Palo Prisma, but now they're looking at an SD-WAN fabric, right? These technologies, we have the ability to incorporate those and still use their existing security fabric. So it's not, when people, I think a lot of times people think of SASE as an all or nothing decision, and it's not, because we've got to come in and talk to you and your company about what are those security investments you've made today, what's your predisposition to certain technologies. We may walk into an environment and, they're simply a checkpoint house. They are going to use checkpoint, or they're a Cisco house and they're going to use Umbrella. But, you look at Cisco SD-WAN, that's not one of the top technologies. So we in our particular case with VeloCloud, we're oftentimes connecting with other third-party devices to bring a fabric together as opposed to a one-size-fits-all platform. So.
And shameless plug, back to the whole ATC element, is they are going to know who's going to work well together and who's not going to work well together. So take advantage of the partners that are available to you in order for you to make that transition that much easier.
So, Matt, I'm not sure I need to ask this question anymore. My next question was going to be, I already have a new security platform or posture. Can I use this with SASE?
Yeah, again,
You kind of already answered that in the last one. I didn't know if you had something else to add.
So we're going to want to come in. I mean, again, I think that's the value. We're basically a managed service provider, and CATO is really, you guys are coming in and you're providing the design, the delivery, the day two support, same thing for us. So we're going to want to come in and understand where you are today, what predispositions you've got to the particular components, right? And then be able to bring in the right solutions. But to your point earlier, sometimes we're not the right fit. I mean, I literally was on a sales call about 9 months ago, 20 minutes into it, and I'm like, don't talk to me anymore, talk to Big Leaf. There was a particular situation that it was just perfect for the dollar to go to Big Leaf. So the other thing is, we don't want to be pushing a square peg in a round hole as we sit and talk to customers either,
So would you all agree with, it really doesn't matter where your stance is today, just kind of get started, get your feet wet, start asking questions, start having the meetings, start thinking about it?
It's just happening, right? It's like on the UCAS side. UCAS continues to explode, right? 3 years ago, there wasn't a single hospital that was talking about making a journey to UCAS. Now,
There are some now?
yeah, they are all over the place. Exactly. It's
They
exploding.
were very resistant, for sure.
Completely resistant, right? And I think similarly on the wide area side and the network side, we were just ingrained to running oftentimes Cisco routers at the edge, right? And hiring propeller heads, and they'd sit at desks and something would happen and we wouldn't know what happened in the network. We are all moving to cloud solutions, and the cloud orchestration layer of an intelligent wide area network is just where we're all going, no matter who you end up using.
Yeah, and I think to Matt's point, just moving everything to the cloud as far as over the pandemic, I mean, we've seen so much influx in Zoom and UCAS products, and it only makes sense to move the network to the cloud at that point too. So to Dave's point earlier, getting started and just getting your foot in the door with an SD-WAN, with a SASE type technology, you're setting yourself up for success in the future.
And the reality is, right, your business is, you're competing with the other companies that are that are out there doing something similar, believe me that they're looking at this. Believe me that they're looking at this avenue, because it's going to give them an opportunity to be more competitive against you. So you would be silly not to at least spend some time in taking a look at these technologies.
All right, thanks. We'll move on to this one. I'm going to pick this up because it's a little bit longer here. I'll read it. How has the pandemic changed the way you think about security and managed security when you think about the data center, work from home, hybrid workforces, hybrid anything, cloud anything? Like, how has it changed? How has the pandemic changed the way you look at security or managed security?
So from a CATO perspective, we look at it pretty similar to what we did before. From a customer perspective, obviously there's some significant change, right? Now all of a sudden all of your users are at home and you got to worry about Susie and what her son's Netflix is doing at the same time and what the application performance is going to be with all these other services that are incorporated in the background. From a CATO perspective, the reason why I say that it's pretty similar is because we've incorporated into our SASE platform the ability to associate to those remote users as well. And with the solution, you can create security profiles or user identities that can be passed. It doesn't matter if the user is outside the organization, inside the organization, on the VPN, at the office. They're going to have the same security posture, and it's going to be applied through that single framework.
And we're similar along those lines, whereas although CATO, you own all the intellectual property, that's your platform, right? CBTS has taken kind of a slightly different kind of a best-of-breed approach in that the SD-WAN side for us is typically VeloCloud today in our more complex environments. And then adding on the components either from Checkpoint or from VMware, they've got a new group of SASE tools that bring, again, that same kind of flexibility. No matter where a laptop sits, whether it's in network, whether it's sitting at Starbucks, it has all that same security, same access, kind of a ZTNA level access to applications if you want to deploy that, VPN clients. So whereas CATO does that with all their intellectual property, we've been a little different in managed service provider that we kind of use tools from VeloCloud, Checkpoint, and VMware to bring that solution together, but similar results in the end.
The big thing, too, is that posture element, and I'm sure Matt would agree with it, right? It doesn't matter where your user is at, whether they're in the office or out of the office. You should have a way to profile that user so that you can make sure that no matter where they're at, no matter what they're doing, they always have that exact same security posture.
Linked to AD, identity management, the whole thing's expected now, yep.
I have a global network. Will SASE help me, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to the idea of ZTNA and zero trust network access. Moving into this world of remote work and you don't really know where everyone's going to be, you have to protect those individuals at every place that they're at. Not only from that perspective, but from just a global unified network. Everything is going back to these POPs in a SASE framework. So being able to see that from a single pane of glass, manage all of your locations. If you need a new location, just spinning it up. That's really important.
Yeah, I'll tell you from a CATO perspective, we have over 70 points of presence today. They're all around the world, pretty much anywhere people live today. Why that's also ultimately important is when we push a posture to the cloud, that posture is distributed to all of those different points of presence. So it doesn't matter where your user's located, they're going to get connected to that point of presence, and from there get quick access to the resources that they need to get access to. And from your perspective, you again have that single posture that you've established through that single cloud framework, and it's going to be distributed everywhere.
Now this is a fundamental difference really between CATO's
Finally,
approach.
can we get them going at it?
I know, and VeloCloud's approach. CATO runs, and correct me if I screw this up, Jerry. CATO runs a global network, a global low latency network. And one of their claims to fame, right, is that if I've got applications that are sitting, let's say, in the US and I need to access EU or vice versa, instead of riding the internet, they're going to ride your global network, right? And that's going to take some latency out. Now, at the same time, you have access to POPs to get to SaaS, for CASB services, for secure web gateway, et cetera. Our approach on VeloCloud side is similar, really pretty much very similar on the SASE side, the security side, but really our customers don't want to use somebody else's network. They want to build this fabric all across the internet, right? So it goes back to these applications, right? Are there reasons for applications that I want to use somebody's global network for some low latency, advantages? Are there some emotional reasons that I don't actually want to use somebody else's network? I want to do this all over the internet. But what are the applications that ride too, right? So we certainly have lost a number of customers and prospects to CATO because it fit better. At the same time, we've won a number of VeloCloud deals who are looking at CATO because they had applications that were HTTP based, they were more local in the particular regions, and there was no reason to take advantage of the global network as long as the other SASE components were there. So it's back to this consulting of what are the applications, what's the job I'm trying to get done, what's the risk we want to mitigate, and what's the right platform to take a look at.
Okay, Mr. President, you have 20 seconds to respond.
The one thing I will say in response is the reality of the situation is that you're using somebody else's network. So you can say that you're separating it by using the internet, but the reality is you're still using somebody else's network. The difference in this scenario is I've got a redundant backbone with redundant connections everywhere, and I've essentially made my own internet. I'm not relying on somebody else. I'm peering directly with all of my nodes, and I have the ability to route your traffic more effectively. And so ultimately, I have the ability to recover when there are network issues, and I can recover quickly, and I can identify these threats immediately because it's all running through a network of my own internet.
Go ahead. You get your...
No. That's certainly...
I think what you say, that really, at the end of the day, Matt, it comes down to what's best for the client. And to your point, very neutrally stated, which is some customers don't want to be riding on someone else's network. I do understand your point. It's always somebody else's network.
Yep.
But it feels more like it's yours and you can be looking at the data and blah, 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 right? And then there are some people that say, I want somebody that can control latency much better because, or latency and just performance of the network, because I may have applications running that will only tolerate super sub-second kind of latency, right? And it really just comes down to what are the applications? What does the customer want? And at the end of the day, it's our job, it's your job, it's everybody's job just to find out who's looking at these services and what's going to be the best fit. I know we've all had opportunities where we've found a great fit, and it's been a lot. That's why we're all successful. But there are times where it's just not, right? Absolutely. All right, so I'm moving all my applications to the cloud. Why would I want SASE? Why would it benefit me? Why would I do that? And we're seeing a lot of applications obviously going to the cloud. So why does SASE help?
No, absolutely. We mentioned POPs, right? So this is very similar between the VeloCloud and the CATO world, is that these POPs are placed basically in tier 1 content service provider areas, and it's about then using the ability to have multiple routes to that POP, right? To have things like forward error correction, even be able to fix loss to SaaS applications. So you take POPs and you get them closer to the applications, your SaaS applications that are out there, or instances in AWS or Azure, and then use even across the internet or the network, because at some point they've got to drop it off. But the ability then to more accurately and robustly get you closer to those applications, and to be able to, even when you're going to SaaS applications or UCaaS applications, be able to be on a phone call, disconnect a connection, and my application still stays up, my phone call still stays up. You simply couldn't get those things done in the past in traditional networks. And the right SD-WAN technologies can enable, with those POPs, enable better access to your SaaS applications, more redundant, more resilient, and then you can layer on security, as we've been talking about on the SaaS side.
Yeah, and I would agree with him, right? At the end of the day, you want to get access to those resources as quickly as possible. We refer to it as beachfront property, right? Essentially, you want direct access to that resource. The other huge element, too, is talking about resiliency. Because in a traditional MPLS network, maybe you pay for an MPLS connection into Azure or into Google or whatever those things are. You have a single path. If that path fails for whatever reason,
absolutely,
you have no way to be resilient.
They were data center centric oftentimes. You get in and people are buying express routes or connections into Azure, AWS, came out of 1 or 2 data centers, and you lose that fabric and you lose all access to these applications. And we're seeing more and more customers. Flexential was making that pitch earlier today of the lift and shift to cloud resources right there. Those cloud resources that sit in AWS or Azure or Flexential need to now be available to every user, no matter the status of a headquarters or building. They've got to be available to everybody, and these technologies help enable that.
Yeah, I remember it was Abu, right, with Flexential doing his presentation up here. If you remember, in the middle, he was wishing he had a pointer Because in the middle, he said the most important thing to all of this is the network. And I think in the past, network, it's been a little bit boring. It's always kind of been there. It's had different flavors. But as we move more and more applications out to the cloud, the network is just becoming more and more important than it ever has been. And oh, by the way, so is security, right? Unless anybody wants to tell me cybersecurity is less of an issue today than it was a few years ago, probably no hand's going to get raised there. So when you combine networking and security, and you look at where the applications are today, I just hope that you all will give it its due, because if you haven't, you're missing out on some opportunities. You're a little bit behind probably your competition. What are the differences in SD-WAN offerings? Aren't they all the same?
No, not at all. There's significant differences in that edge device's ability connected to multiple circuits, let's say, whether that's hybrid, MPLS, point-to-point, or internet, right? So there's differences in how it can handle hybrid networks. There's differences in the convergence times around these applications. You've got an application running and I lose my primary connection. How quickly does that converge over? There's differences in the underlying technology, whether it's packet-based or session-based, kind of talking about being able to move individual packets of a TCP or UDP session across multiple connections. So there are some very significant differences in the underlying SD-WAN technology out there, and that's why I think, again, you've seen CATO and VeloCloud in particular rise to the top and continue to be Gartner leaders. Is that this is one of the things that both of these technologies are great at, is the ability to move applications sub-second around problems, yet get them closer to applications at the same time. There are differences.
Yeah, and I'll just say that each of the manufacturers have come at approaching these technologies from a different perspective, from a different thought process. And why is that important to you? Is one of them fits your business, or maybe a few of them fit your business, and there are a few that don't fit your business. So taking the time, again, shameless plug, to take advantage of the fact that you can get a partner that has the ability to whittle down exactly what that is, so that you can have a quicker time to getting that technology implemented to improve your business, is vitally important, and a company like ATC can do that for you.
Yeah, and one thing to add there is we had a specific example that you two were going head-to-head. We were working with an organization out of Cleveland, and they were very sensitive to their application access, and they had MPLS circuits. It was very expensive, but we ultimately determined that over just looking at the solution, we were able to pinpoint exactly what they needed, but put them in a situation where they're going to be able to access SASE in the future. So it's really just about understanding what's going on in this complicated scheme.
All right. Do you still see the need for MPLS or Metro East circuits with SD-WAN or SASE? And why would someone use SD-WAN or SASE with MPLS?
I think there are still use cases where it is important. At the end of the day, if you need an if you have a service that's vital, that has SLA-driven responsibilities assigned to it, having an MPLS ultimately can help that scenario.
Yeah, although I think as these applications are shifting, the difference in latency, let's say in North America, between 20 milliseconds and 35 is really kind of going away. I really see mostly it's an emotional or cultural thing of people wanting to keep some traditional networks in their environment. Like I mentioned earlier, that somebody's got a headquarters and 4 distribution centers and 50 other locations. They're actually just not emotionally ready to tell their CIO they're moving everything over to the internet. They're going to keep the smaller offices on the internet, and what's going to happen over time is they're going to see actually those smaller offices are working as good or better than the combination of the MPLS and the internet.
For a lot less money?
Those things are going to go away too.
For a lot less money?
It's like SIP trunking. You guys sell SIP trunking all the time now, right? SIP trunking 5 years ago had to have a circuit. Nobody's going to buy SIP trunking if I'm not going to bring a circuit to your front door. SIP trunking now absolutely is being delivered across the internet, sometimes just over the top completely, sometimes using some SD-WAN fabrics, in a carrier's core, like we use VeloCloud in our core down to a customer premise, to actually deliver voice in mission-critical environments over multiple internets. We've got a hospital in Indiana that is moving from one circuit to 4 internet service providers and using a VeloCloud and high availability pair just to anchor our SIP trunking. Because in fact, it's going to be more redundant and resilient than the MPLS circuits that we had to them before. So it's just an emotional thing. People still are tied to it. Like we've got a very successful VeloCloud customer that is 20 locations of a bank, and they wouldn't anymore give up their layer 2 metro Ethernet network than a man in the moon. But by putting SD-WAN at the edge and internet, they now have sub-second resiliency for every application, and in fact can keep those applications up, literally a TCP or a banking application up and yank in a connection. And that simply couldn't have been done before with traditional technologies.
I think it's still important to note, though, too, adding the SD-WAN and allowing the software to define how the traffic
overlay.
is going to be
Absolutely.
routed and networked is vitally important to that success. If you're going to stick with MPLS, that's fine that you can do that. Like Matt said, maybe you're associated to it and you're not ready to give it up. At the very least, you should consider a technology like SD-WAN to be able to deliver that, because it's going to deliver it much more effectively than a traditional solution.
It's a great point. I'll geek out a little bit, right? MPLS typically, right, I've got DSCP tags. I've got kind of priorities of applications, and there was a certain limit of those things. You put an SD-WAN at the edge and put an overlay in the MPLS environment, right, as well as the internet. And I IPsec encrypt everything, so now I'm encrypting traffic across MPLS, but then now be able to very granularly look at priority levels, application priorities, things you simply couldn't do before in the traditional DSCP tagging.
Yeah, that reminds me too, because sometimes voice seems to be like an afterthought, like it's no big deal. What's one of the hardest applications to run over a network? Every time there's packet loss or any kind of minor performance degradation. So based on our time left here, I'll skip the question. There have been a couple of shameless plugs already about how a partner might be able to help out in that journey of designing and installing a SASE or a SD-WAN network. So last, what excites you about it? I mean, if you do anything every day, it can be a little boring or monotonous, right? You're doing it all every day. All of you are doing it every day. So what excites you about it? Start with Alex.
Yeah. So the most exciting thing for me is being able to work with organizations and really transforming the way that they're thinking digitally about their networks, positioning this technology and enhancing their organization down in the future. That's what's most exciting for me.
For me, when it comes to SASE, the part that really, really excites me is the future of SASE. Because we're sitting here today talking about all of these different components. The reality of the situation is that competition fuels innovation. So what is going to be the next thing that's going to be incorporated in? How is this technology, the same way infrastructure as a service started off as somebody else hosting servers somewhere and you just renting from them, how is this technology going to take that next step? It's super exciting to think about.
My last thing I'll say is I think this has been the most fun I've had in my career in the last 3 or 4 years dealing with this, because now we're starting to talk about business outcomes. It used to be I'd come in and sell circuits and like, it's connected, it's 50 meg, good luck, I don't care. And we care now. And so it's a great opportunity to sit and be able to start to talk about what are the business outcomes, the business challenges, and what are some of the solutions we could bring to bear to build this next generation fabric. So to me, it's just a lot more fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody? Question from anybody? Don't be scared. It's just a mic. Won't bite. I know some of you well enough. I'm going to call on you.
I've got a single location right now. I've just got a single internet line coming into the building. I'm going to be replacing it with at least a couple lines coming into the building as we move our ERP to the cloud. Need to replace my firewall and security infrastructure. Is SD-WAN even part of that design? I know.
Yep, but go ahead.
Could everyone hear that? Good? Yeah? Everybody hear that? All right. Go to work.
I'll start.
Go ahead. You go for it, Alex.
So
I'm
you're
not
talking
scared.
You're talking about bringing in multiple connections into a single location. So what SD-WAN is going to provide to you is being able to have visibility into those circuits, see which one is performing well, see which one is not performing well, and then you're also going to be able to prioritize those applications that you're accessing in the cloud as you move your ARP to the cloud too.
You can do some load balancing, some prioritization.
Yep. So instead of buying a circuit and having it sit there idle, waiting for the other one to have a bad day.
And hope like heck it works.
Yeah, and hope like heck it works because you're not actively testing it. That's a fair point as well. You're going to be able to actively load balance across all of those different connections. And then if you leverage a SASE-based solution where you can take advantage of the POP architecture, that ERP is going to be located somewhere in the cloud. Where is that going to be located? Pick a vendor that's going to have a point of presence there so that they can route that traffic and take advantage of packet duplication or forward error correction, which is going to allow you to send the same traffic over both paths at the same time for stuff that's important, like your ERP, and be able to recover if one of those paths has an issue.
Yep. So it's about redundancy and availability, because literally these technologies can even fix packet loss between your location, that POP, and the front door in front of that SaaS application in front of your ERP. So it can actually even fix packet loss across this path now.
Great question. Anyone else? We're slightly over. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah.
You want a mic or are you going to speak up?
No, I'll speak up. Okay. So until I walked in this session, I don't even know what SASE is. It was never defined. I'm still lost as to what, I saw this. I don't even know what it is. And you guys.
So, yep. That was a big mistake, wasn't it? Secure access. It's the title is the title is Secure Access Service Edge, is what that stands for. The idea is that if you've got an intelligent SD-WAN edge, then what are the security components either at that edge or in the cloud that can be layered in to fill out your secure web gateway services, CASB services, VPN or zero trust network access, some of these things. So it was really kind of, CATO was actually at the beginning, Gartner and CATO really kind of built the term, and we've all been stealing it, if you would. Well, it's not really that way, I think, but Secure Access Service Edge is about a smart edge, and then one of those security components can be delivered in the cloud in conjunction with that smart edge.
You didn't say what of those units. You said all of those things that can be available, right, from a security perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is the convergence, right? The convergence of all those different technologies, moving them to the cloud, converging them, simplifying them.
Anyone else? Thank you. When you put your surveys out, make sure that we didn't tell you what SASE was first. I'll own that. I'll wear it. All right. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.